Mihai Codreanu, Romanian pronunciation, Mihai Codreanu, July 25, 1876 to October 23, 1957, was a Romanian poet, particularly noted for his sonnets. A native and lifelong resident of Iași, he published his first volume of verse in 1901, followed by another 2 years later that solidified his reputation. Aside from another book of sonnets in 1914 and two during the 1920s, he authored 3 highly successful translations of French plays. He also edited a series of newspapers and wrote widely for an array of literary reviews. Attracted to the stage from early on, he led and reformed the main theater in his city for several years after World War I, and during the 1930s presided over the art school in Iași. Beginning in 1905, he suffered from an eye disease that soon left him unable to read or write, tasks that he accomplished through intermediaries. He was born in Iași. His father, Mihai Codreanu, a native of Târgu, was a judge and a Latin teacher at the National College who died of tuberculosis in September 1877. His mother, Natalia, was born in 1843 to Dimitri Manzariu, who later changed the family name to Marzescu. She worked as an inspector at a maternity hospital. Her brother was Gheorghe Marzescu, while Mihai's first cousin was Gheorghe Marzescu. He attended secondary school from 1887 to 1894 in Iași, Bacău, and Bucharest, and probably moved around schools due to poor conduct. Codreanu's poetic debut came in Lumea Illustrata magazine in 1891. From 1896 to 1900 he studied at the law faculty of the University of Iași, also taking courses in medicine, philosophy, and philology. His thesis focused on the patria potestas in Roman and Romanian law. He studied declamation at the Iași Conservatory from 1897 to 1899. In the summer of 1899, after graduation but before receiving his diploma, he attended a theatrical performance by State Dragomir, and began whistling to express his disapproval. An outraged Dragomir demanded punishment. The school's leadership met to discuss its options, and resumed its investigation in autumn. Finally, the Education Ministry decided to withhold his diploma for 2 years. Codreanu took private lessons in dramatic arts with Eugene Sylvain at Paris in 1900. While there, he saw a performance of Cyrano de Bergerac and decided to write a translation after receiving written permission from Edmond Rostand. Work on the project went slowly, but he published it in 1920 to great enthusiasm in the cultural milieu. The play premiered in Iași in 1928. Other translations, which sold widely, include Jean Richepin's La Martyre, 1901, and Rostand's La Princesse Lointain, 1903. Both translations were successfully staged for many years at the Iași National Theatre. In spite of an adolescence spent dreaming of an actor's career, Codreanu's only role on stage came in 1912, when he appeared in his translation of La Martyre. His first volume of poetry, Diaphanous Forms, was published in 1901. He convinced Titamae Orescu to write a preface for the Charles Baudelaire and Michael Eminescu-influenced verses. The resultant piece suggested that the young poet drop the imitation of Baudelaire and focus instead on Eminescu's style, which prompted Codreanu to drop the preface entirely. The contemporary press praised his uncluttered style and the classical beauty of his verses. Dincan, from time to time, was published in 1903, and when reviewing this work, critics began to regard him as an authentic poet rather than a novice. The volume, initially published at Iași, appeared 2 years later as part of the prestigious Bucharest-based Biblioteca pentru Toți. In 1905, he developed an incurable and hereditary eye disease that prevented him from reading and writing for the rest of his life. The sonnets that form his legacy were thought up and memorized before he dictated them in final form. He wore dark glasses and often leaned on friends' shoulders when he walked. The disease progressed gradually, so that colors and light slowly disappeared and he was almost entirely blind in old age. He also lost his abundant hair early and took to wearing theatrical wigs. Later, the baldness was somewhat reversed, but as the newer hair was not as rich as the wigs, he invariably appeared in a beret. In 1914, he published Statues, a collection of 99 sonnets, several of which he had composed for the dedication ceremonies of statues in his city. The work was hugely successful, garnering praise from Tudor Arghezi, Eugen Lovinescu, and Galaction, as well as from his friends Garibaldi Brăileanu and Octave Botez. Although Isabella Sadobianuevan was dismissive, he edited newspapers in his native city, including Nutatia si Propaganda, 1897 to 1898, Liberalul, 1904 to 1906, and the newly established Mascaria, 1909. Not coincidentally, his cousin Marzescu was director at Liberal in the same period, and founded Mascaria. In 1908, he was among the founding members of the Romanian Writers' Society. Magazines that published his work include Viața, Evenimental, Viața Româniscă, Flacăra, Convorbire Literar, Adevărul literar și artistic and Revista Fundătoare Regale. Viața Româniscă was especially important in advancing his reputation, and his statue appeared at its publishing house. A prolific writer, his articles ranged from filler articles about how to catch rats, to political and literary analyses and reflections on patriotism, education, and morals. In 1914, he became a substitute professor at the conservatory, where he taught diction, expressive reading, and criticism. He was full professor from 1920 to 1938. His mother died in January 1916. While Iași, where Marzescu was serving as mayor, would soon become the temporary capital of Romania during World War I, Codreanu's poetry was untouched by the dramatic events taking place around him. Around this period, he lived in a small old apartment in the yard of what is now the Union Museum. From 1919 to 1923, Codreanu headed the Iași National Theatre, taking over from his friend Mihai Codreanu. Following the creation of Greater Romania, he saw the theatre's mission as the propagation of a national culture in an enlarged state where part of the population had only tenuous links to the national consciousness. After sending his troupe of actors on an extended tour throughout the Moldavia region, he accepted an invitation from Tiberiu Brăticeanu to have the actors perform in Transylvania, newly emerged from Austro-Hungarian rule. They also reached Cernăuți, the capital of formerly Austrian Bucovina, where they helped inaugurate a national theater. Additionally, Codreanu reformed the way the theater operated. Instead of having plays rotate after 4 or 5 shows, he kept only the best parts of the repertoire and divided the troupe in two, one for comedy and drama, the other for tragedy. In his second year as director, the theater turned a profit for the first time. As a result, actors and playwrights became much better paid and their professions rose in prestige. He also obtained funds for repairing the building, badly worn out during the war. Codreanu served as General Inspector of Theaters in 1924, and returned to head the theater on an interim basis from January to November 1928. Meanwhile, he wrote a canticle dissertațiunii, the Song of Vanity, 1921, praised by Brăticeanu but scorned by Lovinescu. In the event, he went on to become the second winner of an annual national prize for poetry in 1925. In 1927, Codreanu persuaded him and Pastorel Codreanu to join the Cantimaire Lodge of the Romanian Freemasonry. The three were also linked through membership in the Viața Româniscă circle. After the review moved to Bucharest, its place in the cultural life of Iași was taken in 1936 by Însemnarea Iașeană, which he co-directed with Codreanu from 1937. His last volume of original sonnets was the 1929 Turnul de Fields, The Ivory Tower, and in 1939, he published Statui. Sonnets și Evenimentari din sonnet, Statues. Sonnets and Escapes from the Sonnet, which collected his prior work while adding a few new sonnets. He was the conservatory's acting rector in 1932, and held the post in his own right from 1933 to 1939, once again showing his skills as an administrator. In 1942, he was elected a corresponding member of the Romanian Academy, from which he was purged by the new communist regime in 1948. Near the end of his life, he published Sonnets, a volume of selected sonnets, with the help of Codreanu. In the intervening decades since his last original book in 1939, his writing was confined to magazines. His distinctions included House Order of Hohenzollern, First Class, 1914, Chevalier of the Ordre de Palmes Académiques, 1921, the Légion d'honneur, 1929, and the Order of Labor, First Class, 1956. He died in 1957, and was buried in Eternitatea Cemetery. Codreanu's first marriage, in April 1906, was to Sofia Bettina Vicar, who also served as secretary and caregiver. She died in 1946, and the 70-year-old widower quickly married Ekaterina Hare, a 35-year-old native of Brăviștea in Bessarabia who had worked as his housekeeper since age 19. Arriving illiterate in his home, she managed to complete 4th grade, with a low passing score, in 1940. In addition to caring for her aged husband, she kept his personal objects in their original state after he died. He is rumored to have fathered a love child, but this individual, who became a university professor, denied the story his entire life. From 1934 until his death, Codreanu lived in a house called Villa Sonnet, built on land donated to him the year before by the Iași authorities in recognition of his achievements. Codreanu sold rather than build a house on an adjacent plot he was given, saying he did not wish to live in Codreanu's backyard. Since 1970, the house has been a museum almost entirely preserved as it was during his lifetime, including his personal library, office, dining room, and bedroom. Codreanu walked around with a cane. The one kept in the museum was reportedly used during his Masonic initiation, and conceals a 70cm blade of Toledo steel that he used to defend himself from drunkards and the jealous husbands of the women who thronged around him. Once, it was stolen while he was with a prostitute in a brothel, but it was later recovered. Puteria Parentiasca in Dreptul Roman si Roman, doctoral thesis, Iași, 1900. Diathane, Iași, 1901. Dincand. Poeziae, 1901-1903, Iași, 1903. Martyra, verse drama in 5 acts, translated from Jean Richepin, Bucharest, 1903. Prințesă Îndepărtată, verse play in 4 acts, translated from Edmund Rostand, Bucharest, 1903. Statue. Sonnet, Iași, 1914. Cyrano de Bergerac, heroic comedy in 5 verse acts, translated from Edmund Rostand, Iași, 1920. Canticle Dissertatione, Iași, 1921. Turnul de Fields, Bucharest, 1929. Statue. Sonnet si Evidari din Sonnet, Bucharest, 1939. Sonnet, Bucharest, 1957.